It was just another heated moment in a tense political climate. Karen, upset by a disagreement, did something that would change everything. She pepper-sprayed a man wearing a MAGA hat. But here's the twist: she had no idea who he really was. In the chaos of the encounter, she thought she was just standing up for her beliefs. But little did she know, the man in the red hat wasn't just any ordinary person. As the spray cleared and the situation calmed down, Karen quickly realized her mistake. The man she had just attacked wasn't some random Trump supporter. He was a US general, a highly respected figure in the military. The shock of that revelation left Karen reeling. How had she reacted so impulsively without knowing the truth? The situation went from a simple argument to a potentially life-changing moment in the blink of an eye. Now, Karen's facing consequences she never saw coming. But was she right to feel threatened, or did she let her emotions cloud her judgment? In the next part of the story, we'll dive deeper into what happened after the spray settled, and whether Karen and the general will ever find common ground. Stay tuned as we uncover the dramatic aftermath of this encounter. Karen had always been a passionate person. She didn't back down when it came to standing up for what she believed in, especially when it came to politics. The divide between the right and left had never felt more intense, and she often found herself clashing with those who didn't share her views. But that day, something triggered her in a way that she hadn't expected. When she saw the man in the MAGA hat, her anger took over. The familiar frustration with everything happening in the world came rushing in, and before she could stop herself, she reached for her pepper spray. What Karen didn't know was that the man she had just attacked wasn't someone she could easily dismiss. Colonel Richard Taylor, the man in the MAGA hat, had spent decades serving in the US military. His career had earned him countless accolades, and he had been on the front lines in more ways than one. His life wasn't just about politics. It was about serving his country, his values, and his duty to protect the freedoms that many take for granted. But none of that seemed to matter to Karen in the heat of the moment. As she stood there, staring at him with a mix of regret and confusion, she could see the shock on his face. But there was something else in his eyes too, a sense of calm. How would this moment change both of their lives moving forward? Was there still a chance for understanding, or had they crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed? The silence between Karen and Colonel Taylor was thick, as if the entire world had paused. She could see the wheels turning in his mind, processing the shock of being attacked in public by a stranger, yet his expression remained eerily calm. It was almost as if he had been through something like this before. Karen, on the other hand, was starting to feel the weight of what she'd done. The anger that had driven her to react so impulsively was now replaced by a growing sense of dread. Her heart raced, and her mind was caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. But the tension didn't just stem from the encounter between the two of them. Around them, people were starting to gather, murmuring among themselves. Some had seen what happened, others were only beginning to notice the standoff. Social media was already buzzing with footage of the incident, and Karen could feel her phone vibrating in her pocket with texts and notifications. This wasn't just a private moment anymore. It was turning into something much bigger, something that could spiral out of control. Colonel Taylor didn't move at first. He simply stood there, wiping his eyes where the pepper spray had made contact, his expression unreadable. Karen wanted to say something, anything, to explain herself, but the words wouldn't come. How could she explain a moment of pure emotion? How could she take back what she had done? As the crowd began to murmur louder, someone called out, "Hey, what happened? What did she do to you?" The question hung in the air, and it was clear that the colonel was now the center of attention. The more people that gathered, the more pressure there was to make sense of this strange moment. Karen noticed the intensity in the eyes of some bystanders. They weren't just curious, they were waiting to see what the colonel would do next. Would he press charges? Would he show mercy? Or would he take the opportunity to escalate things, to make a statement of his own? But Colonel Taylor, still standing tall, did nothing. His hands were steady as he removed his jacket, revealing a military insignia on the sleeve. The realization hit Karen like a brick. This wasn't just a random confrontation with a political opponent. This was a clash with someone who had dedicated his entire life to serving a cause she barely understood. And now she had no idea how to navigate the consequences of her actions. The crowd waited in suspense, and Karen's own breath seemed to catch in her throat. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. All she could do was wait for the colonel's next move, the tension thickening with every second that passed. The air felt charged, like an electric storm was brewing just beneath the surface. Karen could feel the weight of every eye on her. The whispers of the crowd were growing louder, the phones raised higher to capture every second of this bizarre encounter. She could almost hear their thoughts. Asterisk, what's going to happen next? Will he press charges? Asterisk, her pulse raced as she watched Colonel Taylor's every move, his silent composure only adding to the growing sense of unease. He hadn't spoken yet, hadn't made a single gesture to escalate the situation. But the longer the silence stretched, the more Karen began to feel the walls closing in. She tried to steady her breath, but the anxiety was nearly suffocating. In the back of her mind, she couldn't help but wonder if this moment was about to turn into something bigger than either of them could control. She had made a rash, emotional decision, but now, with the eyes of everyone around her focused on the aftermath, it felt like something far more dangerous was in play. What if she lost everything over this? Her job, her reputation, her sense of right and wrong. The colonel, still standing in front of her, seemed almost unfazed. His hand brushed against his face, wiping away a few tears caused by the spray, but his gaze remained sharp and unwavering. The crowd's murmurs faded into an eerie quiet, and Karen could feel the tension rising, thickening in the air between them. Was he going to snap? Was he going to retaliate? She couldn't read him. His calm demeanor was almost unsettling. Then finally, after what felt like an eternity, the colonel spoke. His voice was steady, almost too calm. "You don't know who I am, do you?" His words were like a punch to the gut. They weren't accusatory, just factual, delivered with a quiet intensity that made Karen's stomach churn. Before she could respond, someone in the crowd shouted, "Hey, that's Colonel Taylor, right? The one from the news. The general who's been all over the headlines." The recognition spread like wildfire. Karen's mind scrambled as she tried to process the weight of his identity. Asterisk a general, a man with power, influence, a lifetime of service. Asterisk, she had no idea who he really was, but now everyone around her did. The story was no longer just between two individuals, it was becoming a public spectacle. The colonel didn't flinch at the recognition. Instead, he turned his back on Karen for a moment, looking out at the crowd. "I've served this country for over 30 years, he began, his voice rising slightly, "and I've seen more than my fair share of conflict, but nothing prepared me for this." His eyes locked onto Karen again, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something in them. Was it disappointment? Anger? Or something else? She couldn't tell, but it was enough to make her heart pound harder in her chest. Her legs felt unsteady, and she took a small step back, as if trying to distance herself from the gravity of the situation. But the crowd closed in, their eyes glued to the unfolding drama. 1,000 questions buzzed in her mind. Was this it? Was this where it all unraveled? Would she walk away from this moment, or would the fallout be too much to recover from? And just as the crowd fell into a tense, expectant silence, Colonel Taylor did something Karen didn't see coming. He raised a hand, not to strike, but to gesture toward the street. "Come with me," he said, his voice firm, but not unkind. "Let's get out of here." Karen's breath caught in her throat. What was he offering? A chance for redemption? A confrontation that would only escalate? The uncertainty hung in the air like a storm cloud, ready to burst at any moment. Karen stood frozen, her heart racing as Colonel Taylor's hand hovered in the air, an unexpected gesture of calm amidst the chaos. The crowd waited, their eyes now shifting between the colonel and Karen. For a brief moment, it felt like time had slowed down. Asterisk, what did he mean by "come with me"? Asterisk, her mind scrambled, trying to find any meaning behind the words. Was the offering a chance to explain herself, or was this a trap, a way to humiliate her further? She hesitated, the weight of the moment too heavy for her to move. But then, just as she was about to take a step forward, something changed. A sharp sound cut through the tension, a sudden loud crack, like a gunshot echoing in the distance. The crowd stirred, and Karen instinctively turned her head toward the noise. A figure was emerging from the back of the gathering, pushing through the crowd with a sense of urgency. It was a woman,